Hello, Garance.
Hi, Dan. How are you? Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you, too. Did I get the pronunciation of your name correct?
It's Garance Franke-Ruta.
Garance Franke-Ruta. I'm sure you get this all the time. What is the etymology of that name?
In fact, I have started a blog, partly as a lark and partly just as a way of explaining that. And there's a whole page that goes through at www.thegarance.com. Goes through the origins of my name, but suffice to say, it's French, German, Italian. And
I actually have it right now. Okay, I'm looking at it. Oh, yeah. I see. Okay.
Yeah. My standard line is it's like something that was put together by a Brussels committee, so. The usual rootless cosmopolitan history, so.
I'm very jealous. It's a very gripping name. In fact, when it was suggested that we do this, I remember the name immediately because I think, I'm not immediately a regular reader of the Prospect blog, but I remember a couple of posts that you've always done, you've done, and the name always sticks out. So I think it's an asset on your side.
Okay. So, moving on from my name, which
yes,
you wouldn't believe how hard it is actually being a
Speaking of names, let's go on to talk about name calling.
Yes, name calling, very nice. John Edwards was called a faggot by Ann Coulter at the Conservative Political Action Conference. Mm-hmm. And subsequently, this has led to a real issue for Ann Coulter. It seems to have been a turning point in her career, and it's about time.
I would say it's one of several turning points in Ann Coulter's career, but yeah, I agree with you. This is a really bad career turning point for her. As you pointed out, it appears that first of all, I would add, I think most conservative groups were, lightning quick to back away from Coulter on this. All the major presidential candidates, immediately disavowed her, and which would not necessarily be out of the ordinary because Coulter's done this sort of thing before. What's interesting is that, as you point out, is that it's starting to affect her bottom line in terms of her pocketbook.
Yeah, obviously she was invited onto Fox News afterwards, and she's still relatively popular. But I think the interesting thing about this is that it comes on the heels of the Michael Richards incident at the Laugh Factory, and then also on the heels of the Isaiah Washington incident from Grey's Anatomy. And so that in the past, where Ann Coulter would have just been looked at as like, oh, that's Ann being Ann. Now it's the situation where there is this sort of existing framework for interpreting events like this. And the interesting thing is it's coming out of progressive Hollywood, actually, has created this framework for interpreting public individuals who make these outrageous line-crossing remarks. And so because of that, it was much easier, I think, for people to object to Ann Coulter. After all, she did call Al Gore a fag last summer, and not that many people objected to that.
Well, I think you actually posted something which I found amusing. It was a link to a GOP USA fact that actually, the frame I liked was comparing Ann Coulter to Britney Spears.
Oh, which is, GOP USA did that. They, the conservative outfit, and they just, they said, she was joking, oh, well, if I say this, then I'll have to go to rehab. But they were saying, it actually seems like she does need help at this point. And,
right, no, it's a similar thing because Britney, let's face it, had been misbehaving for quite some time prior to this last little, head-shaving incident. And again, Coulter, has crossed the line repeatedly for about the last, 5, 6, 7 years. So now we can finally, get to the final stage where, you almost look at her with pity at this point.
Well, I don't look at her with pity. I don't look at her with pity. I don't think pity is part of her vocabulary. I don't think mercy is part of her vocabulary. I think she's very ruthless and very tactical and very skilled at what she does. And she's a...
Then why do you think she screwed up, though? This is clearly a screw-up on her part.
I think she missed that there's been this leftward turn in the entire national character. The pendulum has swung. It's not her era anymore. It's over. And I think that's been the really interesting thing that's been going on now. And that's one of the reasons that, Giuliani, who is a fairly liberal Republican, as these things go, is the leading Republican now. I think you're getting... I'm sorry, I'm getting a call on the other line. Just ignore that. I haven't done this before. There's a call on the other line. This isn't my phone either. Okay, so, yeah, there's been a real change, and I think John Edwards has become increasingly interesting because in 2003 and 2004, he was the Southern moderate, he was very cautious, he was a little bit more DLC-ish. He was putting forward these very sort of small proposals, and now he's really going full bore and decided, hey, I'm going to be with the Netroots the whole way. People joke, they say, John Edwards without the Netroots is Dick Gephardt, and so the Netroots are what really give him a real strength. But it's also, allowing him, as someone who's not in office and has no platform for action or for affecting public policy, to actually have a useful impact on public discourse, because he has now been involved in the situation with Ann Coulter, which has created a situation where Ann Coulter is being shunted aside, and also then with Fox News when he stepped out of the planned debate for August in Nevada. And was the first person to do that.
You were a supporter of this. Why what was so bad about him participating in a Fox News debate?
Well, I think Fox News has been very, it's been Ann Coulter-ish about all the Democratic candidates and about a lot of Democrats and about a lot of liberal ideas, and that they haven't been fair and balanced. And I think people were just tired of it, and they're like, we don't have to do this. I mean, Barack Obama was shutting out one of the Fox News reporters because, what are they going to do to punish him? Call him a terrorist on television? They already did that, and mistaking him and so on, and saying he went to some madrasa in Indonesia when that's not the case.
Right. And I think the Obama campaign kicked Carl Cameron off the plane, right? Was that what the punishment was?
I don't know that they kicked him off the plane.
I think they did, yeah.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, because they basically said, what are you going to do, call us a terrorist again? It was a great comeback.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, this is, and then obviously at that point, things become very complicated. John Edwards has stopped out. Bill Richardson's the only one who says, yes, he's going to go. The rest are all waiting. The Congressional Black Caucus Institute, which did its debate in 2003 with Fox, has been having negotiations with them and with CNN. There's a lot of talk about, hey, something's coming down the pike. They're going to make an announcement. Wait and see before you decide what to do. Because, people don't want to alienate African Americans either, and to maybe rule themselves out of debates that are going to be conducted on Fox before African American audiences. In any event, this whole thing between Move On and the Daily Kos people and everybody created so much pressure on the Nevada Democratic Party that they just folded, and I presume that the candidates probably had a little bit of impact on that as well. And then obviously Roger Ailes making obnoxious comments about the candidates provided a useful cover for just everybody just throwing in the towel on this. But it's interesting because it creates it sort of turned John Edwards into the Media Matters candidate, He's taking on the right-wing media, and that's his new thing. And I think it's going to be very popular with a lot of the bloggers because that perspective, the critique of the media, is really critical to the rise of the blogosphere entirely.
I suppose. I have to admit, in terms of the media, I have to preface by saying I'm not completely getting your sound, so I apologize if it's coming in a little bit garbled. It's like a cell phone transmission, unfortunately, but I think I got most of what you said. My problem with the cable networks, I don't have a lot of love for Fox, but I also, was trapped in a conference for a couple days where the only choice I had in terms of watching when I would be exercising at the gym was CNN. And dear God, when did CNN start to suck this badly?
I don't know because I don't watch it anymore.
Okay, it was.
It was
completely unwatchable.
Yeah, I watch it occasionally. Anderson Cooper sometimes does these, really fantastic, in-depth specials about things. I watched it, nonstop during the war between Israel and Hezbollah.
Right.
But, Fox is interesting in that they do these local news stories and cover parts of the country that nobody else is covering, and they cover stories that are somewhat off-topic, and so it's actually new information for viewers.
Right. This is one of the. I grant you. Fox News has committed a lot of sins, but I actually do think they've got strengths that some of the other networks don't in that respect.
Yeah. But moving on, I want to hear about, speaking of foreign policy, you said that you were recently at a conference where the fact that the presidential campaign has started so early may be having some putting some constraints on what people are willing to say.
Well, yeah, this was a conference on non-proliferation that the Burkle Center at UCLA set up. Okay. And let me just here right now give a shout-out to Cal Rastiala, who set up the conference and invited me out, which was very kind of him. But it was very interesting because Bill Perry gave the keynote address. And the thing about the talk, it's not that Perry said anything incorrect or out there. In fact, that was part of the problem. The problem was that Perry's talk and also during the Q&A was almost, completely held hostage to whatever his prior statements were. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you, almost every single question that was posed to him, he would then say, well, I said this in this op-ed and I'm not going to deviate from it, or I said this in this congressional testimony, I'm not going to deviate from it. And it was a very odd sort of way of wording it. And I was talking with some of the other, and this was mostly a group of Democratic policy wonks. And what became very clear is that a lot of these people are basically going to keep their mouths shut for the next 2 years.
Interesting.
And the reason is they want confirmability. The concern is that most of these people have aspirations for cabinet appointments should a Democrat get elected.
Right.
And so as a result, the last thing they want to do is take a really out there public position now that 2 years from now looks really stupid, or looks inept or what have you. And my concern is whether or not this is actually going to blunt, sort of discourse about foreign policy over the next couple of years. Because the problem is that anyone who's got a stake in, a potential future administration is going to watch their words very carefully. I mean, the Perry thing was pretty bland that way.
Well, do you think that they're not going to go any further than the Democratic candidates? Because it seems like the candidates themselves are being reasonably aggressive, at least in critiquing the war, taken, as a group. I mean, I agree that the candidates are being public about it, but the candidates, once they're elected, they obviously can claim that we've got a mandate. The problem with sort of the advisor level is they've got to pass the Senate. And I would actually argue in some ways getting Senate confirmation might actually be trickier than getting a majority, than getting a majority of the Electoral College. Is certainly one problem. I mean, another example of this is the Death of America Abroad, the blog that was devoted to foreign policy on Josh Marshall's site. That pretty much has evaporated for a variety of reasons, but one of which is that I think a lot of the people on America Abroad, might actually aspire to policy positions. Right. I mean, or they might aspire to advisory positions for campaigns and don't want to be out there blogging independently and potentially saying something that's off message for their candidate. Right, the Amanda Marcotte problem. Yeah, exactly. Right, and then also I think it's lead blogger Juliet, whose last name is escaping me. You know who I'm talking about. Who? I'm sorry, say it again? I think that the lead writer on that site actually took a job in the Deval Patrick administration in Massachusetts, and so she's not blogging anymore because of that. I think she's the main terrorism consultant for the state of Massachusetts now, so she right. Oh yeah, Julia Kayan. Yeah, Julia Kayan. Right. Julia Kayan. Yeah. No, well, that's interesting. I mean, the thing that I also find interesting is that the Democrats are trying to differentiate themselves one from each other based on foreign policy questions, but ultimately I think that they're all, at least with regard to Iran policy, reasonably similar in terms of what they're saying. Everybody supports some mix of engagement and containment, as compared to the Republicans, who I think are much, much more hawkish and aggressive in a frightening way, especially John McCain, about what they would like to do with Iran. I mean, McCain has said, over the past couple of years, he said that, Iran is, 6 months away from getting a nuclear weapon, and that we should be, much more aggressive than we have been, and, considering military action even. And I think that's a very, very aggressive strategy. I do want to talk about McCain, but I want to get back to the Democratic policy advisors for 1 second, because this does call them, I mean, you pointed out, we had some email correspondence on this, and you think that basically whoever winds up being the nominee, most of the Democratic foreign policy establishment is going to line up behind them. Yeah. The one question I have about this is that I remember in 2004, there was a great article in the New Republic about this, about once Kerry won, it was clear Kerry was going to get the nomination, the Kerry people basically froze out the Dean people. Including foreign policy. Ivo Daalder, who was Howard Dean's foreign policy advisor, basically got shut out of the Kerry camp. Right. So, I mean, are you being a little optimistic about this? I mean, I think it partially depends how the campaign plays out. Well, obviously it depends on the campaign, but I mean, I mean, I know who Edwards' foreign policy people are who are advising him, and I don't see any reason that they wouldn't be perfectly at home on a Clinton campaign, frankly. No, again, it's not an ideological question. It's a question of you have a year of a really tough campaign. Yeah. It's going to create some bad blood, even at the foreign policy level. I mean, that's what I think happens. There's definitely a bad blood question, and that happens in every campaign. And there were parts of the Dean campaign that worked. I mean, let's be, what didn't work about the Dean campaign? What didn't work is, in some ways, some of his statements on foreign policy. I mean, obviously, he mobilized people around being anti-war in a way that was very brave and out in front of the rest of the pack at the time. But he also said a certain number of things that I think got him in a lot of trouble, especially with John Kerry, in terms of Saddam Hussein's capture not making America safer, which everybody attacked him on at the time, even though he was correct. However, Dean's field people were picked up, and in fact, Dean's... and were picked up by Kerry and are now working for Clinton. So, I mean, Clinton has been drawing from both the Dina and Kerry operations, for example, in New Hampshire, and I think that's possibly going to stand in good stead there. What's going to be interesting to see is Obama, because he had Samantha Power advising him, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of different impact that has if he's willing to make Darfur more of an issue because of that, or sorry, your phone is ringing again. I'm sorry.
No, it raises. I mean, it raises some interesting questions, particularly because I don't know what. There are a lot of people out there that will argue that the Samantha Power types have at least some complicity in terms of dealing with Iraq. Not that Samantha Power, I think, even endorsed the invasion of Iraq, but rather the argument that preventing humanitarian catastrophe should be a vital component of U.S. foreign policy does lead, ironically, Obama to wind up embracing this, could lead Obama to wind up embracing the exact same kind of foreign policy interventionism that McCain winds up promoting. I mean, McCain is one of the biggest enthusiasts for sending U.S. troops to Darfur.
I just don't think they're going to be the same.
You just don't think they're the same? But why? I mean, let me put it this way. Intellectually, there's a core of sort of interventionism and, prevention of genocide and...
There's a difference between liberal interventionism, which is, I believe, what Samantha Powers represents, and, that period, a brief period in American history, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, where we happened to do things that wound up working, and working reasonably well for people. And I think... I don't think McCain's vision of interventionism is the same. It's much more perhaps colonial and imperial in its attitude. And I think
colonial
makes a big difference. I mean, this is one of the questions. I mean, Brzezinski has talked about this, about America and Iraq as a colonial enterprise, and we're going to be there until early 2009. To start with. We're not even going to start having the discussion about getting out until early 2009, realistically, given this president and everything that he said. If the surge succeeds, the prize is that we get to stay another 5 years and manage things on the ground. If the surge fails, we're going to be, in August or something like that, people are going to start evaluating, well, what's Plan C? And we're going to be there quite some time, and you have to wonder, if you're in a nation for that long militarily. I mean, what is the historical precedent for that? It's not a very nice one.
I mean, on the one hand, you're absolutely correct. On the other hand, U.S. forces were in Germany, and in fact still are, to my knowledge. U.S. forces were in Japan, and they still are. And those are the favorable comparisons. I grant you that obviously, in both cases, the populations generally have far less of an issue with U.S. troops on the ground. So it doesn't quite work. On the other hand, I think McCain is sort of an uber interventionist. I don't think of him as a colonial. He's not an imperialist. He's someone who wants to use U.S. force. I think that the perspective on the right is that, particularly among the neocons, is that McCain is potentially the competent version of Bush, which is, a lot of remember, a lot of the neocons in the 2000 election did not work for George W. Bush initially. They all worked for the McCain campaign.
Right.
It wasn't until Bush got elected that some of them signed on. And, McCain's out has always been on Iraq, for example, that yes, I supported the invasion, but I would have done it much better. I would have gone in heavier and then presumably gotten out, and as a result been able to get out quicker as well. What makes you think, you blog about the fact that, he's favored, for example, military action against Iran, but correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Obama in the 2004 campaign make a crack about having to lob missiles at Iran as well?
I don't think he made a crack about it. He was being interviewed by the Chicago Tribune, and in the course of the discussion said, that he could understand a situation where that would be something that he would have to consider. And I think more recently he said that he would not take military intervention off the table. And so that makes, the candidates, the top three candidates, 3 for 3, that none of them are taking military options off the table, although all of them emphasize that they prefer a combination of engagement and containment. And I think the U.S. actually suddenly has at its disposal an exceptionally powerful tool in terms of the economic sanctions that were instituted in December and which are being expanded and possibly expanded with European banks to isolate Iranian funds and to make it extremely difficult for other banks internationally to want to have anything to do with Iranian companies or Iranian banks. And I think that this is going to be a very powerful tool.
No, and this is, you hit my policy wheelhouse because I do write on economic sanctions, and there's some evidence that the sanctions that were imposed, I think there are two aspects of it. The first, the very fact that the UN actually imposed sanctions. If I told you 2 or 3 years ago that you were going to get 2 unanimous Security Council resolutions on Iran about nuclear weapons, you would have laughed at me because it wouldn't have seemed possible. And you got to give Ahmadinejad credit. It takes a lot of work to actually get the Perm 5 on the same page with regard to sanctioning a Middle East country. So that's pretty impressive. And I think just the fact that they got sanctioned has had some blowback effect in Iran. The second thing is that you're right. The sanctions themselves are going to have some bite. Because it makes it tough for Iranian banks to get access to capital, if it's going to impact particularly foreign direct investment, because the Iranian energy sector badly needs a lot of foreign direct investment in order to start expanding oil and natural gas exports. Because otherwise, I think if the status quo continues, Iran could actually be theoretically an oil importer by 2010. That's how decrepit their current investment equipment is. So you're right on the one hand that sanctions might have some bite, but this is my concern. My concern is that, as I said, Ahmadinejad has almost been a gift horse for the United States in terms of being able to apply pressure against the Iranian regime. The guy makes George W. Bush look subtle. He's holding Holocaust denial conferences. Right. He's insulting everyone at every turn. The thing is that it's not like the Iranian clerics don't want a bomb. They just want it in much more subtle ways. And so my concern is that what's going to happen in the end is that you might actually see Ahmadinejad get deposed, by one means or another because he's, acted like such a buffoon. And instead you wind up replacing him with someone who's actually much cleverer, which doesn't necessarily deter Iran from getting a bomb.
Well, we can cross that bridge when we get there. In the meantime, it would be useful. This conference in Iraq is a first step of just, even saying that, we'll be in the same room with the Iranians. And maybe at some point...
Hold on. Go back to crossing that bridge when we get there. You mean we can cross the bridge when Iran gets a nuke? Or what?
No. If and when there's a new leader in Iran,
I see.
We'll cross the bridge of...
Right.
Dealing with that new person and figuring out whether they're better or worse. But I think, I think, we have to just assume that we're dealing with who we're dealing with right now.
Well, this is part of the problem in Iran. But this is part of the problem in terms of dealing with Iran, because the question about who is in charge actually is not that clear. Ahmadinejad is actually the president, but it's not clear how much control he actually has over the nuclear program. And this is one of the problems when you're dealing with countries like this.
Yes, all agreed. From there, shall we move to the GOP further?
We've been talking about GOP leaders, GOP frontrunners. I think you've been continually surprised by, as have I actually, Giuliani's, sort of steady ascent in terms of the polls. What do you make of this?
It's so interesting. It's so not at all what I think anybody expected, and it's really fascinating. I went to the CPAC conference, and just in talking to people there, you think, okay, well, maybe Giuliani is a sign of the GOP moving a little bit to the left, realizing, again, with the pendulum swinging, realizing that they want to get away from being sort of a getaway Southern party where they're, completely beholden to the more extreme elements, except that the more extreme elements are the ones at CPAC. So it's just interesting that Giuliani seems to, from what people were telling me, be able to convince sort of traditional values conservatives on his bona fides. And, we'll see if that lasts. A lot of people I know think this is just air, but that's...
Is it just what?
It's air. It's the moment the real campaign starts, the dirty campaigning, the moment, there's a YouTube clip already going around where Giuliani says, I believe in 1989, that he supports federal funding of abortions for poor women, and that means to pay should not be an impediment to them getting abortions. Once things like that really start going around, I think the drag things are going to be a little less important. Let's remember Will and Grace was extremely popular with Southern women. People are, there's complexities around this stuff. Maybe he'll come down a bit, but it seems like, from what people are telling me, is that McCain and Romney are actually battling for the more moderate elements of the GOP, and Giuliani is being embraced by the conservatives. It's the weirdest thing.
That is a little weird, I agree.
It's very strange. And yet, he...
Well, wait, but that also doesn't make any sense. I mean, Romney has been... if Romney could contort himself so that he could go further right, he would.
Yeah. No, he gave a very, very red meat speech there, and he's really, I just... People aren't buying him somehow. And in fact, I have this little prop, I don't know exactly who's giving these up, but this was one of the things from the CPAC, these Romney flip-flops, and there's like the dolphin guy chasing him around and all that stuff. But Romney is basically the John Edwards of the GOP field.
You think Romney is the Edwards of the GOP field? In what way?
Sort of good-looking, smooth-talking, good on telegenic, top tier, except not one of the top two.
Yeah, it's possible. You're right. It'll be very interesting to see once that. This is the interesting thing. Is it my imagination, or does the campaign seem more engaged on the Democratic side than it does on the Republican side at this point?
It does, because that's how we cover it. Not just me at the Prospect, but I think the entire National Press Corps has some kind of weird hangover from the last few elections where the GOP side was not as open, so that they focus much more on the Democrats and the Democratic field. Yes. And also there's so much more star power on the Democratic side this time. Obama is this new face. He's a fresh face. McCain, the swoon is over.
I think it's that there's more of a dynamic where you've got an upstart that no one expected. Because, McCain is, let's face it, the Republican version of Clinton. He's been around for a while. He's paid his dues, and, he's been, trying to line up institutional support for years. The difference is that there's no one on the Republican side that matches Obama. There really isn't. The closest one I can think of is the guy is, have you seen that Fred Dalton Thompson might run?
Yeah. He can run.
Yeah, well, that's good.
I don't think it's going to change very much.
On behalf of all Republicans, Garance, I would like to thank you for the vote of confidence. Although, one thing, I will point this out.
Hey, I'm a huge fan of Law and Order.
Should I say it again?
I'm a big Law and Order fan, so...
Oh, okay. No, actually, that brings up something ironic I thought about the GOP field as opposed to the Democrat field. For as much as Democrats are always associated as being with Hollywood, it's actually the Republican candidates that have actually appeared on camera much more. McCain was in The Wedding Crashers. Thompson, if he runs, has got a pretty long actor resume. And Giuliani's been on Saturday Night Live. He's been on Law and Order. And he's been on a couple of. I think he's been on. He was on Seinfeld as well. So I do find it interesting. I'm waiting for someone to point out that in fact the Republicans have been much more Hollywood whores than the Democrats at this point.
But they always can be, because it doesn't fit into the classic frame of, Hollywood liberal. Governor Schwarzenegger also.
That's true.
Or Sonny Bono. You have many more people from Hollywood coming out as Republicans and winning office that way than you do Democrats. It's one of the oddities of American politics.
That's true. You're actually right. Schwarzenegger got elected, and Clint Eastwood was mayor of Carmel, and That's true. Republicans have, acted, and of course there's Reagan. So
because it's playing against type, and some of these Hollywood Republicans are indistinguishable from DLC Democrats.
No, that's true. In fact, the conference I was at, Ron Burkle was the one who was the center, the person who promoted the center. He's a big money person for the Democrats, but he's also given a lot of money to Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I guess the question is whether, from someone on the outside looking at the campaigns at this point, the true wild card on the Democrat side is Obama.
Yes.
It's the fact that this guy, you saw the long New Republic cover story, which was a fascinating cover story, sort of on the sort of background of Obama. You don't see that for any other candidate. Either on the Democrats or the Republicans. And I'm not sure there is anyone else that can generate... I was trying to think, before this blogging heads, whether there's anyone who can generate that kind of excitement, and whether or not also Obama can sustain it.
Well, I mean, that's going to be an interesting question. I mean, he's sustained it thus far, and
Yeah.
I think he knows not to be intoxicated by the adulation and by the process. And in some ways, to use a blogging metaphor, I call him the meta candidate, where he's always willing to take that step back from the process and analyze the process as he analyzes his role going forward. And so his politics also involves a critique of politics, and that's interesting and appealing to people because it's an outsider perspective that he's then bringing to it, even though he's in the Senate. But he's just a really unusual figure. No one like him has ever run before. He's a product of his generation, and he's just a unique political talent. He's a natural. I followed him around in Illinois for a couple of days when he was still running for Senate. This was in
in 2004.
Yeah, no, it was in 2004. I was with him the weekend that Ryan dropped out of the race, and sort of watched him.
Oh, yeah. I lived in Chicago
and sort of watched his reaction as he got that news, and just sort of watching him. I mean, he's the kind of guy who, I think he's got the kind of political skills of a Bill Clinton. And so the interesting thing is that you have someone who's like a Bill Clinton figure running, at the same time you have Hillary Clinton running. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I don't think anyone can call this one.
It'll be interesting.
Definitely. It's going to be a fantastic race to cover and really interesting to watch and see. To see, how far has America really come? Is it really going to be, ready to move beyond what it's been doing since it's been founded?
Well, this raises an interesting sort of larger political question, I think. It's a nice segue to the David Brooks piece from yesterday that we both noticed. Brooks had a Sunday column was about the decline and fall of neoliberalism.
Right.
That the argument he made was that neoliberals sort of clustered around the Washington Monthly and the New Republic, and I think later the Democratic Leadership Council I think would be included here as well. These were people who were in some ways just as horrified about the sort of both interest group politics of the left as well as the sort of general kind of sense of detachment between the sort of strong political left and the rest of the country, and a belief that you had to devise more pragmatic policies. And Brooks basically argues that era is over. That what Democratic Party activists want now is not that kind of liberalism that the sort of modern liberals, the MoveOn.org, Daily Kos, what have you. They've been brought up in an era where the Republicans have been in the ascendancy, and they want blood.
Well, they want a lot more than that.
They obviously want a lot more than that, but blood would be good.
Well, it's a side effect. I thought it was interesting with regard to the New Republic, especially, and the sort of changing of the guard at the New Republic and the end of the Marty Peretz era. I'm at the American Prospect. It was founded, actually, after the failure of the Dukakis campaign as a way of trying to sort of reclaim the word liberal as something to be proud of, among other things. And it has
Dukakis, I remember, figured that out about 4 or 5 days before the campaign ended, yeah.
Right, yeah. Anyway, this is a time of a resurgent progressive movement. It's not liberal per se. I mean, it calls itself liberal sometimes, but it calls itself progressive more. And I think it's a very...
But doesn't it call itself progressive because the word liberal has been so stigmatized over so many decades?
Yeah, in part. I mean, there's progressive organizations have done focus grouping on this and have, spread the word, don't call yourselves liberal, call yourselves progressive. It's like a strategy.
Right.
It's a strategy. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think it's also just, people are actually really trying to, signal a little bit of a break with some of the things that liberalism, in the stereotype is associated with. But it's a moment where I think people are we're so far away from the 1960s, I mean... Yeah. It was before my lifetime. It was before and I'm, and I'm not even that, young anymore, where there's several other generations now. And, there's Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Next, not Gen X, but there's Gen Y, Gen Next.
Have we gotten to Gen Z yet? I don't even know. Is there Gen Z yet? I mean, I'm older than you, so, I'm that further out of touch.
I don't think you're that much older than me. Anyway, yeah, no, I was reading Jane Eyre last fall, and there's this great line in there about Rochester as a description of him as, no longer young but not yet middle aged. And I thought, that's me. It's a good description for us.
Bless your heart.
There's this. It's not just the blogs, and it's not just organizations like Move On. It's just that people are tired of having the debate controlled by one extreme, and it's classic sort of Millian politics that if you have an extreme on the other side, you shift the center, and so it's about creating more room, and it's about shifting the center and creating more room for people to talk about different things. And also, just the Bush years have been so disastrous. We lost New Orleans, we lost the war in Iraq, we went into Iraq. What changed?
This ties into an interesting. I would say two things. First, on the neoliberalism point, Kevin Drum actually responded to it, and Brooks, I might add, quoted Drum in his piece. Kevin's point, and I think Jonathan Cohn at the New Republic responded to it as well. And their argument was, neoliberalism is over because it won. That
yes.
a lot of the policy tenets that were part of neoliberalism actually got implemented during the Clinton years. And, most of them are still in place, that are around. And so it's not worth fighting for the final 5% as far as neoliberals are concerned. So, in their interpretation, the battle is over, but it's not a decline. It's just that, it's now been accepted. It's the status quo. The thing I find interesting was, if you go back to the origins of neoliberalism, again, it was in response to one party's sort of shift towards, what was perceived as too radical a direction.
Right.
And, this ties back to our conversation about why Giuliani might be doing so well. What I wonder is whether or not you're going to see a similar movement, you can't call it neoconservatism, obviously, but you can call it something. Whether you're going to see, a similar move on the GOP side. That there's a recognition of, the sort of what Andrew Sullivan would call the theocons have taken us hostage. We've pursued a bad set of policies. This is, in terms of, the long-term political effects, they're going to be pretty significant on the Republican side. Do you think the Republicans will also now sort of think maybe we need to create, a movement that actually distances, ourselves from the extreme right wing?
I think some of the Republicans are doing that. And I think one of the interesting things that's happening also is that a lot of the Republican intellectual class is much more progressive. They're New York Republicans to begin with, and
can you give me some examples?
There's also a generational politics with Republicans, and so that I have friends who work for the Wall Street Journal editorial board. I have friends who are part of the vast right wing conspiracy, and on a personal basis, they are deeply opposed to discriminating against gay people, and
right.
There's a sense in which I think some of the social changes have trickled down to such an extent that there's a sort of demographic similarities and a demographic consensus on certain positions. Obviously, you have a lot of young evangelicals who disagree, but I think the conservative intellectual class has become somewhat more progressive itself than it would have been, say, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that has an impact.
Wait, say that again?
And that has an impact. Definitely has an impact. Catherine T. Lopez can argue against, abortion and birth control, but,
this is one of those interesting questions where I think part of the problem is that on the Republican side, I think you're correct that a lot of conservative intellectuals, they have the same kind of background as liberal intellectuals do. They go to the same universities, they live in the same cities, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think the perception has always been that as a result, those intellectuals are actually much more divorced from the political roots of which they're, the political base that they're supposed to represent. Whereas, to some extent, liberals, they congregate in cities. And they congregate in coastal cities as well. So, in some ways, the sort of liberal intellectuals have actually had much more they're much more integrated with the rest of the party structure. And I'm not sure that's going to be as true about conservatives, particularly if conservative intellectuals are trying to carve out a more libertarian, which would be my preference, kind of policy approach.
I actually think some of what Brick was talking about was not as much between liberalism and neoliberalism as between different kinds of journalism. And my thinking on it is it's the difference between journalism that takes a swipe as a way of taking a position and journalism that takes a stand as a way of taking a position. And I think that for a long time people were so afraid to sort of stand up for things, that the most frequent way of taking a position on an issue was to somehow, do a piece deconstructing something or attacking something or, being hard on someone, and as opposed to sort of affirmatively proposing something. And I think that there's a lot more people now who are willing to sort of affirmatively propose things. And there's been the blogs in particular, I think, have had a real impact on opening up people's willingness to introduce their own perspective and voices more into the writing. And that's across all the magazines.
No, I think that's true. I mean, and look, let's face it, there was a point after which you could almost tell, there's a certain type of piece that the New Republic or Slate or, some others would do. And, God knows, I've done, I think, one or two of these pieces where, it was a, against the conventional wisdom kind of piece.
Yeah, I've done them too. We've both written for the New Republic, so we should just say that for those who haven't read us. Right.
And so, I think you're right in that, instead of being just critical, the idea is that, presumably you're putting new ideas forward. Although, it's one thing to put the ideas forward, it's another thing to actually try to implement them. I'm thinking, like, on the Republican side, there was, the proposal to privatize Social Security. That was a pet project of people at the Cato Institute and other libertarians for some time. Bush comes along and says, hey, let's do it, and it was just a massive whiff. But
it wasn't a massive whiff, per se. It was a massive organized pushback from the progressive movement in concert with these new organizations that exist that were very targeted and very careful in terms of holding people's feet to the fire in their districts.
It was more than that.
And it was also the third rail of American politics,
Yeah. Although, let me put it this way. I agree with you. There was definitely pushback, and I think that absolutely played a role in terms of its demise. But I think the other thing was that there was actually a lack of enthusiasm on many people on the right, in part because the policy proposals were never specific enough. Bush always spoke in generalities, and there comes a point where you actually have to start talking about implementing. And the problem is that for all the agitation about Social Security privatization on the right, there was never a set of concrete proposals that said, this, we're at A, here's B, here's how we're going to get from A to B. And so, in part, as someone who's a libertarian who would, in theory, be perfectly happy with Social Security privatization, I remember reading about it at the time, and the problem was that the numbers didn't add up. It was very clear that they didn't have any plan to sort of, convert from one to the other, and so I lost all enthusiasm for the project because, as much as I'm a libertarian, I also don't want to see a fiscal policy disaster. So, if they lose me, there's no way they're going to convince, a lot of other conservatives on this sort of thing. So, I think it was a combination of the two. And so, the interesting thing is going to be, in the long term, whether or not you're going to see, on the left, let's say Obama gets elected or even Clinton, is there going to be, enough bench strength in terms of on the policy side for implementing, what they, let's say a single payer system or something like that?
I think a single payer system would be a real challenge to implement myself. But, I'm part of that older, slightly more cynical, neoliberal, skeptical generation. So, having watched this happen in 94 and not work out, I would be happy with piecemeal reform. I would be happy with anything. People really do appreciate the changes that are made, and if people wait around, forever to get everything perfect, it's the perfect classic case of the perfect being the enemy of the good. If it's possible to get a single-payer system, that would be great. I don't see it unless there's a real change in the Senate. And first the Democrats have to win the White House, and that's not even assured. It looks like it's assured right now, but you never know how things are going to change over the next 2 years.
That's complete. 2 years. In 19. At this point, George H.W. Bush seemed unbeatable.
Exactly. It's very hard to predict things 2 years out. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? That could radically alter everything. The last few years have been so unpredictable.
No, that's true. I think, close on this. This is something I'll be very curious about in terms of grand policy initiatives, whether or not, and this is a way in which Iraq, I think, is actually going to have some domestic policy spillover. Because if there's anything that we should have learned about Iraq, it's that really big grand policy experiments can so completely explode that the experiment is worse than the status quo. And I mean, I think that's a lesson, God knows, for conservatives like myself who supported the war in Iraq. But I also wonder if it's also, decent advice for liberals that want to do, not Iraq, but I mean, grand, big policy schemes domestically.
I don't think that's the lesson people are drawing from Iraq. I don't think they're drawing domestic policy lessons from it. I think the place they're drawing domestic policy lessons is Katrina, where the government failed, and where the government has continued to fail, and where grand big things that only the government can do to protect the people did not work because the government was not working. I think in Iraq, the lesson is to be cautious about the limits of American power, and also just to be aware that things can always get worse in the Middle East. If everything has to work perfectly in order for anything to work, the odds are that it's not going to work.
That's true, but I would argue that, let me put it this way, you're going to see this critique come from, if policy is approached domestically, which is, you're right, things can be worse than the status quo. It's true, there was a failure of government action, but that doesn't mean that, an ambitious scheme will necessarily work out.
We ran one of the worst colonial regimes with the Coalition Provisional Authority. I mean, if you read Rajiv Chandrasekharan's book about this, I mean, it's
oh,
so...
yeah, no,
I mean, you've read it. I mean, it was so badly managed, and whether you think going in there was, inherently problematic to begin with, that it could never have worked, it was certainly managed exceptionally poorly once they did go in.
Yes, yes, dear God, yes.
Yes, and so, I think people are looking for people who are capable of making things work. But I don't think there's any lessons from Iraq for domestic policy.
Okay. Well, we'll see, a few years from now. But
definitely.
But I'll take your point on that. Okay, I think if we exhausted our topics, or is there anything left?
We could always keep going,
What?
I think we have about 8 more minutes, but we could call it quits here too. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I will look forward to reading your blog more regularly. I'll put it in my RSS feed. I have to admit, I have not had it in my RSS feed.
It's okay.
It's a pleasure talking to you. So.
Excellent. All right, take care.
All right, have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye.